What's going on? Welcome to this aftermarket stereo installation tutorial. I'll be replacing the stock stereo in my 2020 STI with a JVC floating head unit. My goal is to not only retain all of the functionality of the stock stereo, but also add some while considerably improving the sound in the car. This is part 2, so make sure you also check out part 1 to see all of the preliminary steps before completing your harness. Check the bookmarks for specific parts and share this video if it's useful. Let's get to it. So what I have here is one of the most daunting parts of this whole installation, and that's making the wiring harness, making sure everything works. And there is a lot going on here. So the first thing I did is I downloaded the instructions for the Maestro RR2 unit and the harness that I bought for it right there. My car is a 2020 Subaru STI, and I have the 7-inch screen. Now, this car does come with a smaller screen, and that's a completely different installation. So if you missed that, you might be scratching your head as to why things are not adding up. These right here are the connections for the new head unit that I bought. We're going to be going by the installation instructions on the iData link because this is the stuff that we're going to be installing right here. These are all the cables that came with the head unit, and I'm going to put away the stuff that is not applicable right now. So like the microphone, I'm not going to need. The GPS, the USB, that's not going on the main harness. Right here, the antenna, that's not going on the main harness. So now that I have the wiring harness from the new head unit, the micro bypass that we need, which is separate, I'm going to show you kind of what we're going to be doing here. You can see right here, this main harness, that would be this right here. Okay, you're about to see all these cables. Most of them are from here, and then some of them are from here. This particular kit right here supports many different vehicles, which means that some of the cables that you're gonna see, we're not gonna use. And it's telling you right here, not required. These cables right here, you're gonna find in these two boxes, and they're not required. And some of the stuff that you're gonna see is gonna have to get unplugged and plugged in a different configuration. It's a lot going on, but when you break it down in little steps, it's not that bad. This right here is the second Maestro unit. The previous one was the RR, this is RR2. It has some upgrades to it. I decided to go with this one just to try it out because it's a new model, and it also has Bluetooth, which means that I'll be able to configure it on my phone instead of plugging it all into my computer and doing it that way. It's a really good thing that it's small like this because there's not a lot of room back there. So we can take this and kind of tuck it in somewhere. So you can see right here, this is the cable that we're going to be plugging into the car. All the information that the vehicle is going to need and that is coming from the vehicle is going to go through these 3 plugs right here, most of it anyways, and is going to go out to various different spots. So let's demystify this. And to clean this up a little bit, the Maestro unit's not going to use all the cables. It's going to use these 2 right here, the data cable and the audio cable. So the Maestro unit, it's only going to use these 2 right here. And then the micro USB cable that comes with it is to program it. I'll go over that in a little bit. So all of these cables that came with it are actually not going to be used. So I'm going to put those away, put that to the side. And then the harness, obviously we're going to need our main harness right here and these cables right here. However, these 2 are not going to be used. So I'm going to put those back in the box. So this right here is what we're left with. Okay, so we have the cables for the Maestro unit, the harness, and then we have the harness for the new stereo. And then of course we have our bypass. So the next thing I'm going to show you is connecting the iData Link SU harness to the harness that came with your new stereo. So I want to clean this up a little bit. These are my speaker wires right here. So I'm going to cut these off because you're not going to be using the RCA plugs on them. And I'm just going to cut them right about here. These speaker wires that I just cut right here are going to get attached to the speaker wires, the speaker leads right here, color to color from your new stereo, right? I'm actually not going to connect those together because I'm going to be using the low level out from my new head unit. I'm going to go ahead and just cap these off. That way they're out of the way and not taking up much room behind the head unit, and move on. But for everyone else who's not using an external amplifier to drive your door speakers, you definitely need to plug these color to color right there. If you take on a job like this, make sure you have some heat shrink, which you can buy at an auto parts store or order it ahead of time. I will put links to all of this stuff in the video description for your convenience. Make sure you also have high quality electrical tape as well. And you can see right here that I also capped off the other end. Now, under normal circumstances, you can just connect them even if you're using the pre-outs for your amplifier to drive the door speakers. All right, so the harness right here for the stereo, we're gonna go ahead and get this ready. The reason why these cables right here are so long is because they're meant for you to route throughout your car to wherever these points are. For instance, the reverse cable right here is meant to go to your reverse cable in the car, wherever that might be for your particular car. So they make the cables long in case you have to go a long way to run the cable to that spot. You know, same thing with the speed sense cable right here that I just untied. And for your parking, this is that light green cable right here. And I'm gonna talk to you about that in a second when we go and install the micro bypass. However, they're gonna get cut because we don't need them that long. We're gonna go ahead and install the micro bypass. It's quite simple, but I want to run through the wires so you see what we're going to accomplish. The black, easy, that's going to go to ground. So this, again, this is the stereo harness. We're going to tap into this wire right here for the ground of the micro bypass. So that's going to go there. Your blue wire right here, that's going to go to your remote turn on. So in this particular harness, that's going to be this one right here, power control. So this blue wire is going to get tapped into that power control cable right there. And then the green wire, that's the important one. This one is going to go to your parking brake wire. The parking brake wire, so I just showed you, is this light green one right here. This is the cable that's telling the head unit that your car is parked. That way it gets its signal that the car is parked from the micro bypass. And that's how you bypass that safety feature in the vehicle. I cut the wires very short because I don't want it to take up much room. I don't have room as it is. So the black wire went into the ground on the harness of the stereo. The green went straight into the light green wire right here. You don't want that cable going anywhere else. You want it to get its input from the micro bypass. And then the blue went to that remote turn on wire right here. So I left that wire there because we're gonna need to plug that wire into the Maestro unit here in a second. That's done, let's move on. All right, so here's the harness right here. I'm almost done with it. So all I did was I took the harness from the stereo, the new stereo, and the harness from the kit, and I went color to color according to the instructions right here. I went ahead and soldered the wires. You can use butt connectors if you like, but I always recommend soldering if you have the ability to do so. So the harness right here is largely plug and play, but there are a couple things that we're gonna have to do that are gonna require us to find wires in the car and tap into the wires. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Right here, you can see that it's asking us to cut pins 9 and 10 out of that connector right there. And those two wires are gonna go into the climate control connector. And the second thing it's asking us to do is to take this Starlink wire, which is right here, and it's labeled Starlink right there. Okay, we're gonna take that wire right there, and it's gonna go to the pink or pin 24 on the 28 pin connector in the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these two wires right here that is asking us to cut and isolate. That's pin 9 and 10, and the colors are right there, brown and yellow, and then brown and red. So it's these two right here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut them, and then I'm just gonna cap them off. Okay, so I pull them out of the harness like this because they're gonna go in a different spot in the car. So I wanted to have room. So I'm gonna show you where these three wires, the two that we just cut from the harness and the Starlink, which is right here, I'm gonna show you where these three wires are gonna go in the car. Before fully assembling this harness, we have to program the Maestro unit. This will customize the entire setup to your car, the harness you are using, and the specific stereo you purchased. This RR2 has Bluetooth, so I'm plugging it in with a micro USB cable to give it power. You have to download the Maestro app and then register an account. Press this button right here until you see the light flashing to enter pairing mode, and after that the app will quickly find it. Then we're going to flash by vehicle. You have to answer a lot of questions describing your exact setup, and it's very important to answer the questions accurately so the unit is programmed correctly. Verify the steering wheel controls are up to your preference as well. You don't want to discover later that a button is not working correctly. Once satisfied, double check everything here and press flash. This will only take a couple of minutes. I just wanted to show you the Bluetooth since that's new, but you can also plug in the Maestro to your computer, download the WebLink desktop app, and do it that way as well, which honestly I would recommend anyways. So with the Maestro unit programmed, we are ready to finish the harness. My particular car and stereo have a separate plug for the rear camera, so we have to unplug this blue connector here and plug in the separate plug that came with the harness labeled A. Then I'm going to grab the camera cable, which is the one with the yellow RCA, and that's going to get plugged into the yellow wire on connector A. Since the Maestro unit is already programmed, simply plug in the rest of the connectors, which thankfully are either color coded or only fit in one slot. 3 of the cables are right on the SU harness. These 2 right here will get plugged into the new stereo itself and will allow the Maestro to communicate with the new stereo. And since I'm using the gauges, I've already ran that cable in the car to the OBD port, and the plug is waiting for me in the stereo cavity. I wanted to show you what's going on here before I do some cable management and clean this up. So this is a completed harness right here. These are all of the connectors coming out of them. This is pretty straightforward because all you have to do is plug it into the corresponding cable inside the vehicle, which is easy enough. There's that Starlink brown cable right here, okay, and that one goes to the pink wire on the 28-pin harness, that cable right there. So you have to splice into it. There's no way around it. You have to do it. If you don't do it, you might end up with some Starlink issues. The cable literally just flows with the rest of the wires, and you just tap into it right there. Then tape it up and you're good to go there. So that's that cable. Then there's the other 2 cables that are special as well. They come out of this harness right here, okay, these 2 cables right there, and this is in the instructions, and those 2 are gonna go into your temperature control connector down here. This is the connector that connects into the temperature controls underneath right here. It's gonna go into the blue and the red. They're on the very corner. They are pin 1 and 2. This is also in your instructions. These 2 wires right here are super important to be connected. If you don't connect these 2 wires right here, the Maestro unit will stay on indefinitely, and then you'll have to manually turn off the stereo, and there'll be a draw on the battery, and over time it'll kill your battery. These 2 wires have to be plugged in. Everything else is pretty straightforward. We have the 2 cables that are going to go out of the Maestro unit into the back of the head unit. That's these 2 cables right here, okay, so those are going to go into the back of the head unit. Then of course you have your main harness that goes into the back of the head unit as well, your auxiliary cable right there. If you want to use the head unit's USB port, then make sure that you route your USB cable in there and plug it into the head unit as well. Make sure you connect the GPS to the head unit, and I'll show you where I mounted that. This is also important because if you don't plug the GPS to the head unit, you're not going to be able to use wireless Apple CarPlay. The antenna cable right here, this is the adapter that I showed you earlier. So if it comes with a blue wire coming out of it, it's a power wire, just yank the wire right out. You don't need that wire. This is obviously your FM antenna plug, so if you don't plug this in, your FM is gonna suck. This is the microphone for the head unit, so you mount the microphone wherever you want. I'll show you how I routed mine and where I put it, but this is the plug for it. This connector right here is your reverse camera. Okay, this is the factory one that came with the car. So I'm not installing any cameras, at least not yet, to the head unit. I'm using the one that came with the car. So you need this right here. Then you'll have your RCA plug that plugs into your head unit, and then the Maestro unit does the rest. And then one more cable I want to show you is this one right here. So this one right here is coming from the OBD port. I'll show you that routing in a second, but that's where it's coming from right here, and it's already plugged in. So this one right here is going all the way to the OBD port in the car. You're gonna end up with a couple unused cables back there, so just tape them out of the way. But I'm gonna go ahead and do some cable management. Now, before you do your cable management and clean everything up, I highly recommend plugging in the new stereo and testing all of its features. Test the speakers, the FM radio, the microphone, USB port, auxiliary port, the HDMI cable if you installed it, Android Auto, CarPlay, all of your steering wheel controls. Make sure that the stereo dims properly and that when you shut off the car that it turns off automatically. If you followed the instructions carefully, you should be good to go, but better safe than sorry. If it all works, clean it up a bit and enjoy your new stereo. If you haven't done this before, believe me when I say the sound difference between a base stock stereo and an aftermarket one is striking. You will fall in love again with your car. Here's the head unit completely installed now, and this particular one is huge, and man is it nice. Under the passenger seat I have 2 amps, the Rockford Fosgate runs my sub, and the small one here is an Alpine 450 inline amp driving the door speakers. This very small 10-inch sub pumps out 500 watts RMS and doesn't take up much room. The entire system sounds absolutely amazing and worthy of this car. And that concludes this installation. Remember, this is part 2, so check out part 1 to see everything leading up to this point. Don't forget the stereo and the sub review video as well. Thanks so much for watching. If you appreciate the video, I would appreciate a like and consider subscribing for more. Take care.